Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is overturn. This was a verb suggested by the viewer Luis. Luis, thank you so much for sharing so many great ideas. Now, let's take a moment and review some of the definitions or the ways that we use this verb. The first way you might encounter the verb overturn, it means to tip something over so that it is either on its side or it's upside down. So sometimes you might think of this in regards to things around your house. Maybe as children are playing, right? Something gets overturned, knocked over onto its side. A second way, overturn, it also is used very much connected to this first one. So to turn over and to come to rest upside down, typically as the result of an accident. So when I think of this second definition, I think of vehicles. Unfortunately, sometimes there are very serious ones, right, where cars kind of roll, we might say, and so where they end up kind of where the top is on the roadside, right? You will hear overturn used. You'll hear this used in relation to railroad cars as well when there are accidents and derailing. A third way you might encounter this verb overturn means to abolish, invalidate, or to reverse some type of law, a decision, or a situation. Here in the United States, it's really common to hear this verb used in connection to appellate type cases. So, again, very much connected to legal decisions. So, or, as we work through our court process here, you might hear of appellate courts or the Supreme Court overturning an earlier decision or a lower court's decision. For now, you should know that overturn is a regular verb. To make the progressive form of this verb, all you need to do is add ing, and that forms overturning. The past tense and the participle forms of this verb are made by adding ed. Our base verb, overturn, ends in a voiced N sound. This means our ed is just going to make a D sound, and we're not going to add an extra syllable as we say it. The past tense and the participle forms of the verb should sound like this: overturned, overturned. Now, there aren't any phrasal verbs that we need to study or practice today, so instead, we will use our verb of the day and a couple different verb tenses. Today, we're going to practice the present perfect and the simple future with will. Let's start with the present perfect. We use this verb tense to talk about actions that started in the past and continue into the present. We also use it to talk about actions that are completed, but they occurred at some unknown point in the past. So we might not have any idea whether it happened yesterday or a year ago, and that just might not matter. The thing to remember with the present perfect is that we must pay attention to our subject. The two P's in the name of our verb tense, present perfect, can help you remember you need two parts to your verb. But here's what we're going to do to make that verb tense. If your subject is I, you, we, or they, use have and then use the participle form of the verb. But if your subject is he, she, or it, use has and then the participle form of the verb. Let's take a look at an example here. A vehicle has overturned on the highway, right? If you hear somebody say a sentence similar to this, again, you might not know, did it happen a minute ago, an hour ago, earlier today, right? We have no idea, and that's okay, right? What's important here is what's being communicated, right? Likely we have a vehicle that is upside down. If you want to make a negative present perfect sentence, then what we're going to do is again pay attention to our subject. So we start our sentence with our subject. We'll use either have not and then the participle form of the verb, or has not and then the participle. You might notice have not being combined into the contraction haven't, and has not being shortened into the contraction hasn't. Let's take a look at another example. He hasn't overturned any long held views in the past 10 years, and this shows he hasn't been thinking. Now, I saw a sentence a bit similar to this from a candidate for public office. And many times here in the United States, people are criticized for flip flopping, saying they believe one thing and then having sort of a change of opinion or a change in their belief. But someone here was instead criticizing for someone for saying or suggesting their main ideas have never changed, even when they've been presented with new information or new ideas, right? They have not reversed any of their opinions or ideas. Now, let's take a look at making a yes or no question in the present perfect. To do this, start with have or has, then you're going to use your subject, and then the participle form of the verb. Here's my last present perfect example. Has the superintendent overturned the principal's decision? Again, that kind of idea of someone who has the ability to reverse something else or invalidate a previous law, or here again the word was decision, so um, maybe something that wasn't so popular. Now, let's take a look at sentences in the simple future. Today we're going to make sentences using will. Will is most common as people make predictions about what they think will happen in the future. It's also really common in promises as well, and offers. Those are the three big ones. You will hear it as people discuss their plans, although sometimes it's indicating they're a little less certain or maybe a little less confident on whether that event will actually take place. The nice thing, though, about making sentences in the simple future is that our structure stays the same no matter what our subject is. So, in the affirmative or with positive sentences, start with your subject, use will, and then use the base verb. No special endings on the verb here. Here's an example. This new age of worker will overturn conventional thinking and shrink the wage gap. So, someone who was writing and explaining their ideas think this believe or that this is a time where workers are coming together more to sort of campaign for and establish their value, and that they deserve a living wage. So I thought this is going to have an impact. And here you might see kind of reverse that thinking of, the CEO is someone who has to make 100 times what some of the lowest level employees are making. Now let's talk about negative sentences in the simple future. To do this, again, we start with a subject, we use will not, and then the base verb. Will not can be shortened into the contraction won't. WON apostrophe T. Let's take a look at an example of this. The athletic body admitted a referee error in the final minutes of the game, but it won't overturn the win. Here we're kind of talking about like the governing agency of a sport, right? They're admitting, someone made a mistake, but here they are not going to reverse things. They're not going to reverse the outcome. Finally, let's look at making a yes or no question in the simple future. To do this, start with will, then you're going to have your subject, and then the base verb. Here's an example. Will the Supreme Court overturn the appellate court's decision? Right here, maybe we're asking someone else to make a prediction, okay, about a guess about what they think will happen. Now, let's take a moment and talk about some words that are related to our verb overturn. The first word we're going to discuss is just the noun form of our verb. So, exact same spelling, exact same pronunciation. The noun overturn is generally talking about that act of either turning something over, upsetting it, again, kind of that idea of flipping it over. But it can also refer to this idea of some kind of reversal, a revolution, a subversion. An example of that. Let's discuss how the overturn of Roe v. Wade has affected low income women. This is a very famous Supreme Court case in the United States that in the last 2 years has been reversed, its outcome. And so now someone is saying, okay, let's discuss the impacts of this reversal. One more word for us today. It's the adjective overturned. So generally, this is describing something that is upside down or maybe even on its side. An example of this. The 5-car collision resulted in 2 overturned vehicles. So again, that kind of idea, you might have a picture of in your mind of cars that are upside down. Thanks again to Luis for suggesting today's video, and I encourage everyone who's watched this far, if you have an idea for a verb, please leave me a comment. I love making videos that interest my viewers. So thank you all for watching. Have a wonderful day.